during a late church service, two injured strangers stumbled in, shattering the quiet prayer. Everyone panicked, except me, a 64-year-old woman in the back pew. My heart stopped when I saw the ring on the man's hand. I buried the man wearing that ring 3 years ago. The young woman with him collapsed, whispering a name I swore I would never hear again. Tonight, all the secrets and betrayals began to unravel. My name is Eleanor Briggs. I am 64 years old, a widow, and I am sitting in the third pew from the back at the New Covenant Lighthouse Church. This late service in Riverton, Colorado, has become a habit, a ritual to escape the echoing silence of my house and the creeping thoughts of what it means to be old and alone. The church itself offers little comfort, only familiarity. It smells of old wood polish and damp hymn books, the air thick and still. The light is weak, casting a pale yellow glow on the few faces still awake. Pastor Cole is at the pulpit, his voice a smooth, predictable baritone, praying for the weary, the lost, and the town council. To my left, a few elderly neighbours are asleep in their seats, heads bowed in a different kind of reverence. Near the back, a couple of homeless men drift in, seeking an hour of warmth before they are quietly ushered out again. My mind drifts, as it always does. It floats back 3 years, to the day the sheriff told me Graham had drowned, and it drifts to my son, Ethan, my youngest, and the way his recent, suffocating concern has begun to feel like control. The heavy oak doors burst open. A blast of frigid Colorado air sweeps down the aisle, extinguishing the prayer candles on the altar. Two shapes, barely human, stumble against the light. A man, his shirt torn open, dark blood streaming from a cut over his temple. A younger woman, clutching her stomach, her breath coming in ragged, painful gasps. They look like they crawled out of a terrible car wreck. The small congregation erupts. Mrs. Gable lets out a short, sharp scream. Pastor Cole stops mid-sentence, his hands frozen in the air. Pray, brothers and sisters, pray for these souls. Someone in the front row is already on the phone, their voice shrill. Yes, 911. An accident at the church. Hurry. I remain seated. My first thought simply that they must have crashed on the dark interstate just outside town. The man stumbles, catching himself on the edge of a pew. His hand is shaking violently, and the weak light catches the glint of metal. I see it. A plain, old gold band. My breath catches in my throat. I see the worn, inner engraving, though I am too far away to read it. I do not need to. I know the inscription by heart, E and B-1979. It is identical to the wedding ring my husband, Graham, wore for 40 years. The ring he was wearing the day the lake took him. A cold spike of absolute disbelief shoots through me. It cannot be. I lean forward, squinting, trying to make out his face through the blood and the shadows. But he is turned away, his features obscured. I tell myself to breathe. Rings can look alike. I am tired. I have not been sleeping well. I am just seeing things, confusing grief with reality. The young woman moans and lurches forward, collapsing just a few rows ahead of me. She falls near my feet, her body twisting in pain. Before I can react, her hand shoots out, grabbing my wrist with a desperate, cold grip. Her eyes are wide with terror, searching my face. She gasps, trying to pull air. "Please," she whispers, her voice cracking. Do not let Ethan sign anything else." My blood freezes. Ethan, my son. How does this dying stranger know his name? How does she know about the piles of financial papers he keeps asking me to sign? The doors burst open again, this time admitting paramedics in bright blue uniforms. They are loud, efficient, pushing us back. "Ma'am, we need space." One of them yells at me, forcing me toward the aisle. I am separated from the woman. In the chaos of rolling stretchers and shouting, I look at Pastor Cole. He is not looking at the victims with the compassion of a shepherd. His face is pale, almost grey. I see his lips move, and I am close enough to hear him mutter, "It cannot be. He was supposed to be dead." His eyes are not filled with sympathy. They are filled with raw, undiluted fear. I am pushed back against the cold wall as they wheel the two strangers out into the night. My hands are trembling so badly I have to clasp them together. A terrible, suffocating feeling rises in my chest. The past I buried 3 years ago. The life Ethan is carefully building for me. The death of my husband. It is all about to be torn wide open. Right here. Tonight. 3 years ago. The call came before the sun. A deputy, his voice flat with practiced sympathy, informed me that Graham's fishing boat had been found capsized on Greyridge Lake, shattered against the rocks. It took them 36 hours to recover his body from the deep water. A sudden storm, they said. A tragic accident. The funeral was a muted, awful blur. The casket was sealed. The body was severely damaged by the water and rocks. "Eleanor," the funeral director explained gently. "It's better this way." Pastor Cole stood beside me, his large hand a heavy weight on my shoulder, his voice droning about God's mysterious will, urging me to surrender this profound pain to the Lord. I remember nodding, numb, while my youngest son, Ethan, held me. He was strangely calm, a rock of efficiency in my sea of grief, handling all the paperwork, making the calls. My eldest son, Lucas, was not there. He had, as Ethan phrased it, cut ties with the family after his wedding to Naomi. I'd always been wary of that girl. There was something hidden behind her eyes. Then, only a few months after they married, she vanished, and Lucas disappeared with her, swallowed up by whatever trouble she was in. His failure to return for his own father's funeral was a fresh wound, a betrayal that left me with only Ethan. In the weeks that followed, Ethan moved back into my 2-story house. "I need to protect you, Mom," he said, his voice gentle. "You shouldn't be alone right now." At first, his presence was a comfort, but soon, the suggestions started. He'd sit with me at the kitchen table, his hand over mine. "This land, Mum, it's too much for you to manage alone. Graham's portfolio is complicated." He proposed selling off a few parcels, consolidating the money. He wanted to put it into the church's new Sacred Fire Fund. It would help the community, he insisted, and dramatically reduce my management burden. Pastor Cole thought it was a wonderful idea. He brought a woman to the house one afternoon, introducing her as Marla Ingram, the financial advisor for the Holy Congregation. Marla was all sweet smiles and sharp, sympathetic eyes. She spoke in honeyed tones about securing your future and preparing for your golden years. She explained the benefits of transferring my assets into a charitable trust. It was the smartest way, she said, to get tax advantages while ensuring I was cared for. Around that same time, my health began to decline. I could not sleep. I would forget names, appointments, why I had walked into a room. A constant, Heavy fatigue settled over me. Every time I mentioned the fog in my head, Ethan would produce a new amber-colored pill vial. The doctor prescribed these. "Mom, for the stress and the memory?" He would pat my hand, his gaze filled with a pity that stung. "Your memory just is not what it used to be. We have to accept that." He said it so often, I started to believe it. One evening, I was heading to the porch for some air when I heard voices. Ethan and Pastor Cole were sitting in the dark, their words drifting through the screen door. "The power of attorney papers will be ready next week," Ethan said, his voice low and sharp. "Marla is finalizing them." "Good," Pastor Cole replied. "And do not worry about her. The more confused she is, the easier it will be to convince the court, if it even comes to that." I froze, the blood turning to ice in my veins, but I quickly dismissed it. I must have misheard. This was Ethan, my boy. This was the man who baptized both my sons. I was paranoid, grieving, confused, just as Ethan said. My entire life had been built on trust in my husband, in my children, in my church. The alternative, that they were conspiring against me, was unthinkable. It was far easier to fear my own mind. Until last Tuesday. I was looking for my old bank savings book, just to hold something real, something from before. I opened the bottom drawer of Graham's desk, where we kept our most important documents. The blue passbook was gone. In its place was a thick, unfamiliar binder, embossed with a gold logo, Kingdom Horizon Stewardship Trust. I pulled out the sheaf of papers. It was dense legal language, pages and pages of it. I turned to the last page, and I saw it, my signature, on the line marked Grantor. It was my handwriting, the familiar swoop of the E and the sharp downstroke of the B. But I had no memory, none at all, of ever signing it. The following weeks became a blur of manufactured confusion. Ethan was relentless, his gentle reminders turning into constant corrections. "Mum, you forgot again," he would say, his voice heavy with disappointment. "We had that appointment with Dr. Harlan, the psychiatrist. You missed it." I had no memory of any such appointment. "I made another one for next Tuesday. Do not worry." He began mentioning my episodes to others, just loud enough for me to hear. I heard him telling Mrs. Gable over the fence that my cognitive decline was accelerating, that it was getting harder to manage. The pills changed. The small white ones were replaced by a new bottle, a different label, Remicalm Fort. The doctor's signature on the prescription was an illegible scrawl I did not recognize. "These are stronger, Mum, to help you rest," Ethan explained, placing 2 in my palm every night at 9 p.m. The moment I took them, the fog thickened, pulling me under. It was not sleep. It was erasure. I would wake up late, the morning sun already high, feeling hungover and hollow, as if a chunk of time had been neatly excised from my brain. I would look at the kitchen counter and see new papers, sometimes stacked, sometimes signed. Had I signed them, I could not remember holding the pen. Sunday service became a new kind of torment. Pastor Cole invited me to the front row for a special prayer. He placed his heavy hands on my head, his voice booming across the sanctuary. We cast out the spirit of confusion from our sister Eleanor. The congregation murmured, "Amen." But his sermon that followed was not for God. It was for the elderly in the pews. He spoke at length about the burden of worldly assets on the aged and the blessing of transferring decisions to the younger, God-fearing generation. His eyes kept flicking to me, and then to Ethan, who sat beside me, nodding piously. The whispers started soon after. I heard them in the grocery store. Poor Eleanor Briggs. She is not all there anymore. And the praise for my son, that Ethan, he is a saint, sacrificing his own career to care for his ailing mother. I was being neatly packaged into the role of the invalid. The shame of it was suffocating, but worse was the creeping doubt. What if they were right? What if I was losing my mind? One Tuesday morning, I skipped the new pills, hiding them under my tongue until Ethan left the room. My head felt clearer than it had in months. I walked the 2 miles to my old bank, the one Graham and I had used for 40 years. I needed to feel some control, even just to withdraw a little cash. I slid my old passbook to the young teller. She typed, frowned, and typed again. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Briggs," she said, her voice dropping to a respectful whisper. These accounts were closed. All funds were transferred to the Kingdom Horizon Stewardship Trust. She checked another screen. "It looks like you are listed only as a beneficiary, subject to conditions. All management rights are held by the trustee, a Ms. Marla Ingram." The walk home was cold. When I confronted Ethan, the gentle, concerned son vanished. His face hardened. "You forgot again, Mom. We discussed this. Marla is handling everything, so you do not have to worry." I demanded to see the original contract, the one I supposedly signed. I filed it away. "It's safe," he snapped. "Why are you acting like this? You are confused." The coldness in his eyes terrified me. "You keep this up," he warned, his voice low, "and the court will have no choice but to listen when I say you are incompetent. Is that what you want?" That night, I palmed the 2 Remicalm Fort tablets and pretended to swallow them, letting them dissolve in a tissue hidden in my robe pocket. I lay in bed, feigning the deep, medicated sleep he expected. Around midnight, I heard him in the kitchen, his voice low but sharp, clearly on the phone. "The final transfer to the Sacred Fire Fund is happening tomorrow," he said. "Another 50,000. Yes. Just get me the permanent guardianship papers. Once that's signed, everything will be clean. She will not be able to contest anything." A cold, deliberate anger started to burn through the fog. I had to know. I began a simple test. The next day, I took my late husband's silver cufflink and hid it inside the sugar bowl. That evening, I asked Ethan if he had seen it. "Mom?" He sighed. "You put it in the silverware drawer this morning. I saw you." I checked. He had moved it. I wrote it down in a small notebook I hid under the mattress. I realized then my memory was perfectly fine on the days I did not take the pills. The confusion was not coming from my mind. It was coming from the bottle. I waited until Ethan left for a church errand. I walked into the bathroom, uncapped the bottle of Remicalm Fort, and watched as the blue and white capsules swirled down the toilet drain. I flushed twice. That night, for the first time since Graham died, I locked my bedroom door. The house was silent, but my mind was screaming. A single, horrifying thought echoed in the darkness. Is my son trying to turn me into a living zombie, a walking corpse who can still sign her name? 2 days after I flushed the pills. The rain was cold and hard against the glass. I was sorting the mail, a useless stack of coupons and church newsletters, when I saw it. A plain manila envelope, no return address. My name, Eleanor Briggs, was written in heavy, black block letters. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside, there were no greetings, just a dozen pages of photocopied legal documents. It was the full durable power of attorney Ethan had mentioned. I read the terms, my blood running cold. It granted him total control over everything: my finances, my property, and, most terrifyingly, my medical care. He had the right to place me in a facility, to sign "do not resuscitate" orders. I flipped to the signature page. There was my name, in my own handwriting, but it was wrong. It was shaky, the loops unsteady, the pressure too light, as if someone else had guided my hand, or as if I had signed it while half conscious. I looked at the date. It was from a Thursday, 3 weeks prior. I scrambled for the little notebook I kept under my mattress. I found the date. My entry for that night was just 4 words: took new pills, slept Lee B. Tucked into the fold of the last page was a small, typed note. You have never met Dr. Harlan. I know this. If you want the truth about your husband and your accounts, be at the Brickstone Building, room 407, this Thursday at 10 o'clock in the morning. Come alone. My heart hammered against my ribs. This was a trap. It had to be. Marla, or Pastor Cole, testing my obedience, seeing if I would break Ethan's suffocating quarantine. Or the other, darker thought I was truly paranoid, and this was my fractured mind creating a conspiracy. But I saw Graham's face, smiling at me from the bow of his boat. I saw Pastor Cole's face in the church, his eyes wide with fear, not compassion. I was already in a cage. This was just the first person to offer a key. On Thursday morning, I told Ethan I was attending a special ladies' prayer breakfast at the church. He seemed pleased I was being social. The Brickstone Building was a tired, grey structure downtown. Room 407 was at the end of a poorly lit hall, the frosted glass on the door reading only Caleb Ward, attorney at law. The man who opened the door was in his 40s, with a rumpled suit, exhausted eyes, and an office that looked like a paper hurricane had struck it. Mrs. Briggs, he said, not a question. Come in. Lock the door behind you. He gestured to a chair nearly buried in files. I do not have a lot of time, and I assume you do not either, he said, pushing a stack of papers aside. I know your old savings account number. I know that Marla Ingram's real name is Marla Hestrovich, and she was investigated in Ohio for running identical charitable trust schemes on at least 4 other elderly women. He leaned forward, his gaze intense. The only question I have, Mrs. Briggs, is do you actually want to know what happened on Grey Ridge Lake? I could only nod, my throat too tight to speak. 2 years ago, he said. I represented a woman from your congregation, Clara Finch. She was being pressured by Pastor Cole and her son to move her assets into the Sacred Fire Fund. We were building a case for undue influence. Then, overnight, she was declared mentally incompetent by a Dr. Harlan. The lawsuit was dropped. Her son took control, and Clara vanished. She is now in a private, high-cost facility in the next state, heavily medicated. No visitors allowed. He pushed a few grainy photographs across the desk. This was your psychiatric evaluation last month. Does that look familiar? The photo showed Ethan and another man in a cheap suit walking into the medical building. I was not there. You never went? Eleanor? You were home? Sedated? Harlan never saw you? He turned his computer monitor. This medical report, the one diagnosing you with severe, rapid-onset dementia. We traced the file's metadata. It was authored on Marla Ingram's office computer and emailed to Harlan, who signed it for a fee. Who? I whispered, the room spinning. How do you know this? I have a source, Caleb said flatly. Someone who has been feeding me documents on the Briggs case for months. Someone trying to build a federal case but who cannot risk being seen. That person sent you the letter. Who is it? I begged. Is it my other son? Is it Lucas? Caleb held up a hand. I cannot tell you that. It is too dangerous for them. Let's just say it is someone who believes Mr. Graham Briggs did not die the way you think he died. He paused, letting the impossible words hang in the air. And it is someone who wants you to stay alive and sane, long enough to choose which side you are on. I somehow made it back home. The fear was still there, a cold stone in my stomach. But now it was joined by a sharp, violent rage. I walked into the house, my mind clearer than it had been in years. Ethan was in the kitchen, humming. How was the breakfast? Mom, he asked, turning with that placid, concerned smile. I forced my shoulders to slump. I let my eyes go vacant. It was nice, dear, I murmured, letting my voice waver. But I am very tired. I feel confused today. His smile tightened, just slightly, with satisfaction. That is all right. Mom, you go rest. I will bring your pills up to you after dinner. That night, I locked my bedroom door. I did not sleep. I lay in the dark, my anger a burning ember. I dreamed I was back in the church, but a terrible storm was raging outside. The oak doors blew open with a crash, and a man stood in the entryway, silhouetted against the lightning. He was soaking wet, dripping lake water and mud onto the sacred carpet. It was Graham. Caleb called 3 days later. I had been playing the part of the frail, forgetful mother, and I could see Ethan's relief, his condescending patience. The phone rang while he was in the garden. Eleanor. Caleb's voice was tense. Not the office. Go to the bus station downtown. 2:00. Go to the basement level, by the vending machines. There is a steel door marked storage. Knock 3 times. I told Ethan I was going to the pharmacy to pick up a prescription. He offered to drive me. I insisted the walk would do me good, that I needed the air. And I made a show of forgetting my purse, then forgetting my keys, until he sighed with exasperation and let me go, convinced I could barely manage a simple errand. The basement of the bus station was cold and smelled of diesel. The steel door was exactly where Caleb said. I knocked 3 times. He pulled me inside quickly and shut the door, plunging us into a dimly lit concrete corridor. Listen, he said, gripping my arm. What you are about to see is difficult. I need you to stay absolutely calm. Do not make a sound. We are not safe. He led me into a large, cold room. The only light came from a single caged bulb hanging from the low ceiling. A man was standing in the far corner, looking away from us, his shoulders slumped. We do not have much time, Caleb said. The man in the corner turned slowly. My heart stopped. The air left my lungs. It was not a scream, but a choked, tearing sound. My knees buckled. He was thinner, much thinner than I remembered. His hair, once thick and dark, was now a pale, thin silver. His face was covered in a grey, unkempt beard. But the eyes, they were the same stormy grey eyes I had fallen in love with 50 years ago. Hello, Ellie, he whispered. It was Graham, my husband. The man I had buried. The man whose casket I had wept over. You, I managed to say, my voice shaking with a rage that eclipsed the shock. I had a funeral for you. I mourned you. I held a closed casket service. I know, he said, taking a step toward me. I flinched. Ellie, I am so sorry. I had to. They were going to kill me. The story came tumbling out. The impossible truth. 3 years ago, Graham, who handled the church's pro bono accounting, had found the real purpose of the Sacred Fire Fund. It was a sophisticated money laundering operation. Millions. Ellie, washing dirty money through a fake charitable front. When I confronted Pastor Cole, thinking he was just being duped, he smiled. He told me if I knew what was good for me, I would forget what I saw. Graham knew he was a dead man. He secretly contacted a federal investigator, a man named Ruiz. They needed an inside track. They needed to map the entire network. So, they staged his death. The storm on Grey Ridge Lake. The capsized boat. The damaged body recovered by the sheriff, a sheriff who was not part of the local force. They had erased Graham Briggs to let him investigate the very people who thought him dead. Marla. Pastor Cole. And he paused, and his face crumpled. And who else, Graham? I demanded, the cold dread returning. He looked at the floor. And Ethan. No. The word was automatic. Not my son. The night before the accident, Graham said, his voice thick with shame. I was in the church, planting a recorder. I heard them, Cole and Ethan, in the pastor's office. Ethan was telling him how to do it, how to use your mental state after I was gone to move our assets into the trust. He was planning it. Ellie. He saw my death as an opportunity to clean you out, using the church as his cover. I sank onto a metal folding chair. I thought of Lucas. And Lucas, Naomi. They abandoned us. No, Graham said, kneeling in front of me. Naomi was the one who found it. She was the original source. Naomi, the daughter-in-law I had distrusted, had been an accountant for the fund. She found the fake invoices. Before she could get the proof out, Marla framed her for theft. It cost Lucas his job. They had to run, or Marla would have had them arrested or worse. They went straight to the federal investigators. When Graham entered witness protection, Ruiz put Naomi in protection, too. Lucas had to cut you off. Ellie, Graham pleaded. To protect Naomi, to protect you. If he stayed, they would have used him against you. We had to let you believe you were alone. It was the only way to make Ethan and Cole feel safe enough to expose their whole hand. Caleb's phone rang, a sharp, buzzing sound in the quiet room. He answered, putting it on speaker. Ruiz. A fast, clipped voice came through the line. We have a problem. They're accelerating. Marla is dumping assets from the trust, moving cash offshore. And Ethan Briggs just filed the petition for permanent legal guardianship, citing Harlan's report of advanced dementia. A judge will see it by the end of the week. We are out of time. I looked at Graham, my husband who was a ghost, and my anger solidified into something cold and hard. What do? We use their own stage against them, Ruiz's voice replied. They're planning a special service for you, aren't they, late night, next week? To publicly honor you. They'll use it to prove your incompetence and finalize the transfer. We're going to use it, too. He paused. But it only works. Eleanor. If you go back there and play the part, not just confused, I need you to be completely gone. Let them get arrogant. Let them say everything they need to say, thinking you cannot even understand them. I returned to my house a different woman. I was no longer a victim. I was a performer, and my life was my stage. In front of Ethan, my mind became a sieve. I would call him Graham by mistake. I would stand in the middle of the kitchen for a full minute, a look of profound confusion on my face, until he gently asked what I was looking for. I would ask him the same question 3 times in 10 minutes. And when I was alone, when he was out running church errands, I was a woman of perfect, crystalline clarity. I wrote down every word he said in my hidden notebook, documenting his lies, his pity, his satisfaction. The most painful part of this double life was the ache in my chest, the realization that acting senile for my son was agonizingly easy, because it was the only part of me he now truly wanted to see. Ethan, for his part, was practically giddy with my DIL. He saw it as a victory. "Mum, I have wonderful news," he announced one afternoon, his voice brimming with false cheer. "Pastor Cole is holding a special healing and testimony service, just for you, at the end of the month." He explained that Pastor Cole would testify before the congregation about our family's journey, how God has led the Briggs family to commit all our worldly assets to the church's work. It was the final, public act of my submission, the closing of his trap. The next day, I met Ruiz and Caleb. The location was the dusty back room of an old radio repair shop, the air smelling of solder and cold coffee. Ruiz was there in person this time, a sharp man with eyes that missed nothing. He had the plan. "He is right-handed," Ruiz said, holding up a delicate silver cross necklace. "Ethan will sit to your left, close, to comfort you. He will hold your hand. He will never look at this side." He showed me the clasp. "The microphone is in the setting. It will pick up everything." He then showed Caleb a photo. "The floral arrangement on the pulpit will be delivered by our team. A micro camera is hidden in the baby's breath. It will see the front pew, the signing table, everything." That weekend, Caleb drove me miles out of town to a small, remote cabin hidden in the pines. Graham and Naomi were waiting. The air was thick with 3 years of unspoken words. This was not a happy reunion. It was a war council. We rehearsed. "What if he hands you a different pen?" Naomi asked, her voice tense. "What if Marla tries to take the papers from you?" Graham, looking older and more broken than I had ever seen him, played the role of Ethan, his voice mimicking the gentle condescension I heard every day. In a quiet moment, Naomi came to me, her eyes full of tears. "Eleanor, I am so sorry, for all of it, for letting you believe I was the monster. But Ethan," she took a shaky breath, "it was not just the fund. He was using my accounting information to manipulate investments for himself. And when I found out, he set me up to take the fall. He told me he only married me because he thought I would be a useful tool for business. When I realized he was not just greedy, but rotten, I had to leave." Her words killed the last flicker of maternal hope in me. My son had not just fallen. He had been this way for a long time. The question that had been tormenting me, if I had not been so blind, so trusting in my faith and my good son, would this have happened, finally had an answer. Yes. But my blind faith had given him the perfect weapon to use against me. My grief, which had been a heavy, sad thing, now sharpened into a cold, diamond-hard rage. I was not just a victim. I was the fool who had held the door open for the thief. Ethan tested me that night. We were sitting in the living room, the television playing a news program I was not watching. "Mom," he asked, his voice casual. "Do you remember the day? The day Dad's boat flipped? Do you remember how the sheriff said he fell in the water?" His eyes were on me, probing, checking for the cracks. I let my own eyes drift, as if trying to grasp a distant memory. I recited the lines he had fed me months ago, the false memory he and Pastor Cole had so carefully constructed. It was the storm, I whispered. So sudden. The deputy said he was probably knocked unconscious. He never knew what happened. I looked at him, my expression one of wavering, pathetic sorrow. He nodded, satisfied. He leaned over and patted my knee. "That is right, Mom. It was quick. You just rest now." I felt a wave of such profound disgust and shame that I almost choked on it. The rumours in town became a roar. "Poor Eleanor Briggs. Bless her heart. She is going to a home. You know." Pastor Cole's sermons were no longer subtle. He preached of the blessed release of giving over material concerns to your spiritual leaders, his impatience to finalize the deal becoming palpable. The morning before the special service, I slipped into the church. It was empty, the sanctuary quiet and still in the morning light. I walked down the aisle and touched the smooth, worn wood of the third pew, the one where Graham and Lucas used to sit. Graham's arm draped over the back, Lucas always fidgeting. I looked up at the stained glass window, the light a cold, artificial comfort. I did not ask for strength. I did not ask for forgiveness. I whispered to the empty, silent room, to God, or maybe just to myself. This is the last time. If I am to sit in this house, I will see this through to the end, whatever the cost. This is the last step. "Mum," Ethan said, his voice sickeningly bright. He was driving me to a new neurologist, someone Pastor Cole highly recommended. Just to get a final opinion for the records. We sat in a sterile waiting room. I knew from Ruiz that one of the people in the room, a man reading a fishing magazine, was his agent, camera ready. But I had to walk into the examination room alone. The man introduced himself as Dr. Harlan. He was a middle-aged man with a soft handshake and eyes that looked like dull plastic. He did not run neurological tests. He just talked. "Your son seems very devoted, Mrs. Briggs. He's under a lot of stress, isn't he? Taking care of you?" I let my gaze wander to the window. Ethan is a good boy." "It must be hard," he pressed, "keeping track of all the finances, the house. Perhaps you should consider letting him take charge of those important decisions. It would take the burden right off you." I leaned forward, acting confused. "Decisions like the bank." He smiled, a thin, reptilian smile. "Exactly. Do not you worry. We're going to get a full report ready. It will make things much clearer for the court." That night, the night before the special service, I was standing in my dark living room, looking out the window. A car I did not recognize was parked across the street. It had been there for an hour. Just as I watched, the interior dome light flashed on. I saw the silhouette of a woman, the sharp line of her hair. Marla. She was watching my house. The net was closing, but I suddenly was not sure who was the spider and who was the fly. My hidden cell phone, The one Ruiz had given me vibrated in my pocket. I locked myself in the bathroom and answered. It was Naomi. Her voice was a terrified whisper. Eleanor. They know, or they suspect. One of Cole's loyal deacons, the big one who handles security. He's been asking questions around town about Graham, about the accident. She was breathing hard. We left the cabin for supplies. When we got back, it was tossed. They were looking for something. They were looking for him. The emergency meeting in the back of the radio shop was frantic. Ruiz was pale. It's blown. We pull the plug. It's too hot. We cannot, I said. Everyone turned to look at me. My voice was low, but it did not shake. If we pull out, what happens? Ethan's petition goes through on Friday. I am legally declared incompetent. I am put in a home. I am medicated until I die. Everything Graham and Naomi did is for nothing. You will never get them. This service tomorrow night is not a chance. It is the last chance. It is the only time Marla, Cole, Harlan, and Ethan will ever be in the same room, waiting for me to sign a paper. Ruiz stared at me, then gave a sharp nod. After the room cleared, Graham stayed behind. He looked exhausted, older than the 3 years he had been dead. Ellie, he said, I have to tell you, when I was away, I watched. I saw you leaning on Ethan, clinging to the church. For a while, I almost gave up. I thought about just staying gone, letting that new identity be real. You did not seem to need me. I turned on him, the anger I had been holding back finally spilling over. Need you? I was grieving you, Graham. I was crying over an empty box you let me bury. He flinched. It was the guilt, he whispered. The guilt of pulling all of you into this danger. That's why I kept going. Do not talk to me about guilt, I said, my voice like ice. You cannot imagine what it is like to weep over a man who is hiding in a motel room. I do not know if I can ever forgive you for that. I really do not. I looked at his familiar, tired eyes. But that anger, it's the only thing I've been able to count on. It's what's keeping me going. I do not trust Cole. I do not trust Ethan. And I do not trust you. Not completely. I only trust myself. Before I left, Ruiz handed me the silver cross necklace. We'll have people outside. But if it goes wrong, he said, if you are in physical danger, pull on your left sleeve. Twice. That's the signal for the tactical team to breach. They will not wait for a warrant. I nodded, taking the cold metal. But I knew I would not be pulling on my sleeve. I had my own plan. I was not just going to catch them. I was going to give them back every word they had ever used against me. I went home. I stood in front of my bedroom mirror, the cross hanging heavy on my chest. I looked old. The lines around my mouth, the shadows under my eyes, they were all real. But my eyes were sharp. They were the eyes of a woman who had seen a ghost and was about to host a hanging. This was not a story about a poor, confused old woman. This was about a woman who was finally terribly awake, and who was deciding, for the first time in her life, that she would not sign anything ever again. The church lights burned late, brighter than usual for the special service. This was not the usual sparse gathering of the faithful. This was a curated audience. I saw the grim-faced board members of the Sacred Fire Fund occupying the entire front pew, next to 3 of the wealthiest and oldest widows in Riverton. And then there was our row me, with Ethan placed possessively on my left, And on my right, Marla Ingram, her smile as sweet and false as saccharine, and the man I knew as Dr. Harlan, looking grave and professional. Pastor Cole stood at the pulpit, bathed in a spotlight, holding his Bible like a weapon. He began his sermon, his voice dripping with false solemnity. He spoke of the wisdom of yielding our earthly future to the Holy Church. Then he turned his gaze on me. And we have the most touching example of that pure faith here tonight, our dear sister Eleanor Briggs. I could feel the eyes of the other widows on me, assessing me. A woman who, even as her earthly memory fades, wishes to perform one last, great act of service. She wants to dedicate the remainder of her life, and the assets God blessed her with, to his holy work. I felt a wave of nausea, so profound I nearly choked. He was painting me as a holy relic, a generous corpse, already half in the grave. Eleanor, sister, would you join me? He asked, gesturing not to the altar, but to a small, polished table placed directly in front of the pews. Ethan immediately stood, his hand under my elbow, guiding me as if I were made of glass. He sat me in the chair, a public display of his devoted care. Pastor Cole produced a thick document. "This is a statement of prayer and commitment," he announced to the room. He began to read aloud, but the words were vague, procedural, full of whereas and bequeathment unto the stewardship of the Lord's chosen representatives. It was the final document, the one that would make me a ghost in my own life. Ethan leaned in close, so close his breath was warm on my cheek. The microphone in my silver cross necklace would be capturing his every word. "Just sign at the bottom. Mum. Right here," he murmured, his finger tapping the signature line. "This is just for you, to protect you." His hand rested on my wrist, a gesture that looked like comfort but felt like a shackle. I glanced behind me. Dr. Harlan had moved to stand directly behind my chair, his hands clasped, ready to provide his expert witness that my mental state was fully assessed and consenting. I was supposed to stall, to ask questions. But I heard it first. A low hiss, a crackle of static, coming from the church speakers. The sound system was failing. My eyes darted to the large floral arrangement on the pulpit, the one Ruiz's team had delivered. The white baby's breath, where the micro camera was hidden, was wrong. It was pushed aside, angled uselessly toward the ceiling, not toward the table. Someone had found it. Someone had moved it. A cold spike of absolute panic hit me. The wire was dead. The visual was gone. Before I could process the failure, before I could even draw a breath, the heavy oak doors at the back of the sanctuary burst open, just like that night. But this time, I knew them. Two figures stumbled into the aisle, backlit and desperate. Graham and Naomi. They were not actors this time. Graham was clutching his side, a dark, terrible stain spreading rapidly across his shirt. Naomi was supporting him, her face streaked with dirt and tears, her breath coming in ragged sobs. The entire room turned. Pastor Cole froze, his mouth open, the paper trembling in his hand. Marla let out a sharp, involuntary gasp. But Ethan's face turned a waxy, bloodless white. He rose slowly from his seat, staring at the man he believed he had helped bury 3 years ago. Ruiz's meticulous plan, the careful trap. It all evaporated in that instant. This was no longer a sting. It was a disaster. They knew. Naomi choked out, her voice echoing in the stunned, cavernous silence. They knew we were coming. They ran us off the road. They ambushed us. Graham collapsed against a pew, sliding toward the floor, leaving a dark smear of blood on the polished wood. He was dying. Right here. Again. Pastor Cole was the first to react. The mask of piety vanished, replaced by the naked terror of a cornered animal. He looked, not at the intruders, but at the large, burly deacon standing by the exit. It was the same man Naomi had warned me about. Cole gave a sharp, frantic signal. "Brother Thomas, lock those doors. Protect this flock. These people are strangers, imposters, here to harm us." Brother Thomas slammed the heavy oak doors shut. The sound of the deadbolt locking echoed like a gunshot. The atmosphere in the holy sanctuary shifted in a second, from a solemn ceremony to a sealed room. I stood frozen in the aisle. I was trapped. In front of me was the pastor, his lies exposed, and my son, paralyzed by the sight of his father's ghost. Behind me, my husband was bleeding to death on the church floor, and my daughter-in-law was gasping for air. There was no signal to give. There was no cavalry coming. Ruiz's team was outside, blind and deaf to what was happening. If I wanted to live, if I wanted any of this to mean anything, I had to stop being the bait and become the hook. Right here. Right now. The panic was a smokescreen. As Ethan lunged toward the back aisle, his hand reaching for the impossible figure of his father, whispering, "Dad," in horrified disbelief, I moved. I did not run. I walked, with the measured step of a confused old woman, right past the pulpit and into the small sound alcove. My hands, which they all believed were shaking and weak, found the controls in the darkness. My years in the church choir had taught me this panel better than my own kitchen. I pressed the red archive record button, saving everything for the church's internal historical log. Then, I found the small, unused switch labeled Pastor's Study and flipped it on, activating the live microphone hidden in the small meeting room behind the altar, where they were all gathered. Pastor Cole found his voice, a high-pitched shriek of denial. "Imposters, frauds!" he bellowed at the congregation, pointing a trembling finger at Graham and Naomi. "They are here to extort this church, defaming the memory of a good man, Brother Thomas. Call the police. Get these people out of my sanctuary." The massive deacon pulled out his phone, but I saw his thumb tap a contact, not the 3 numbers for 911. I stepped out of the alcove, holding my ground in the center aisle. The light hit my face. I let my voice waver, playing the part they had written for me one last time. "Ethan, dear." All eyes turned to me, the poor senile mother. "I am so confused. You told me father was dead." I looked at the terrified widows in the front pew. "But who is that?" I pointed to Graham, who was slumped against the wall. "Is that the man you told Dr. Harlan was a useless fool who never earned what the pastor did?" The words struck my son like a physical blow. His carefully constructed mask of the grieving, devoted caregiver did not just crack, it disintegrated. "You," he screamed, not at me, but at Graham. "You old fool. You were supposed to be dead. You arrogant, stupid man. You ruined our plan." He wheeled on Naomi, who was trying to press her hand against Graham's bleeding side. "And you treacherous bitch. You gave them the files. You gave everything to the investigators." He was confessing. To the entire room. and the church's own audio system, designed to capture the pastor's holy words, was capturing every profane, damning admission, saving it to its own hard drive. The whispers in the front pew turned to gasps. "Money laundering," one widow said aloud. "Guardianship," breathed another. They were going to put her in that home. Marla saw the game was over, her eyes fixed on one thing, the unsigned guardianship document on the table. She lunged for it, to destroy the last piece of physical evidence. She grabbed the papers, but her panic made her clumsy. She fumbled, knocking her entire leather portfolio off the table. It burst open on the floor, scattering a snowstorm of documents, fake medical reports, forged property deeds, lists of assets, and names, other names. Mrs. Finch, sitting in the front row, let out a strangled cry. "That's my name. That is my house. I never signed that." In that second, the church was plunged into total darkness, a collective scream. Someone had cut the power from the outside, but the engineers who built the church had planned for emergencies. A moment later, the backup battery system kicked in. The lights stayed dead, but the audio system flared to life, not just inside, but outside. The external speakers, the ones that broadcast hymns to the parking lot, crackled on, amplifying every sound from within the whimpers. Marla's curses as she scrambled on the floor, and Ethan's raw, panicked voice. My hidden phone buzzed once. A text from Ruiz. "Ambush. Car crash blocking the street. Cops are on the way. Hold them." I was alone. There was no rescue. I felt my way to the pulpit, my hand finding the live microphone. I clicked it on. My voice boomed through the darkness. "Please, please, quiet." The scrambling stopped. Let us pray," I said, my voice echoing into the night. "One last time, for my family." I bowed my head, the microphone clutched in my hand. "Lord," I began, my voice thick and clear, amplified for the entire town to hear. "I want to thank you for my son, Ethan, my devoted son, who so patiently gave me my medicine every night, the Remicade fort, until I could not remember my own name." I heard Ethan inhale sharply in the dark. "I thank you for Pastor Cole, a true shepherd, who taught me that true faith means signing what is put in front of you without reading. A blessed lesson in trust. And I thank Marla for her tireless memory tests, given only on the days I was so foggy I could not count to 3. The silence in the room was absolute, a heavy, terrified vacuum. The only sound was the distant, growing wail of real sirens. I turned my head toward the darkness where I knew Ethan stood. "Ethan," I said, my voice no longer praying, but judging. "Before God and this entire town, I have one question for you. Do you dare to swear, on your father's soul, that you never once tried to have me declared legally insane, just so you could steal every penny I have?" He stood frozen, a silhouette against the doorway, trapped. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out as the flashing blue and red lights finally washed over his face. Caught in the flashing police lights, Ethan tried to laugh, a dry, rattling sound. "Mum, what are you saying? I was just trying to protect you. You are confused. Tell them." But his voice was drowned out by my own, clear and amplified by the microphone I still held. I was reading from my phone, reading the text messages from Ruiz, the copies of Ethan's own emails to Marla. "Get her into the facility by the 1st?" I read, my voice steady. The papers will be signed, and the rest is just ours to divide. The dam of Pastor Cole's self-control finally broke. He lunged at Ethan, his face purple with rage. I told you not to write anything down. You fool! I told you she was faking. The admission hung in the air, a full confession. The room exploded. The elderly widows were on their feet, not in fear, but in fury, throwing their hymn books to the floor, shouting, "Thief and liar!" The main doors burst open, not with a lockpick, but with a battering ram. The real police, tactical gear and all, flooded the sanctuary, with Ruiz right behind them, his gun drawn. Nobody move. The chaos was immediate. Brother Thomas tried to rush the aisle and was tackled by 3 officers. Marla, scrambling for a side exit, was blocked by Mrs. Finch, the old woman from the front pew, who swung her cane with surprising force, catching Marla square in the shins. Ruiz was in command. Pastor Cole, Marla Ingram, Dr. Harlan, and Ethan Briggs. He yelled, as officers cuffed each one. You are all under arrest for conspiracy, aggravated fraud against the elderly, medical document falsification, and obstruction of a federal investigation. The officers read them their rights. The familiar words, a strange, profane litany in the house of God. And all the while, the church's own archive system was faithfully recording every second of their downfall. Ethan, his hands cuffed behind his back, finally snapped. He writhed against the officer holding him, his eyes fixed on me with a lifetime of venom. "This is your fault," he screamed at me. "It's always your fault. You always loved Dad more. You always loved Lucas more. I was the one who stayed. I was the one who took care of you. I deserved that money." He had finally said it. The truth. It was not about my protection. It was about his resentment, his greed. I walked toward him, stopping just out of his reach. I looked at the man who had been my son, the boy I had raised, and I saw only a stranger, a failed creature. "This is not about love, Ethan," I said, my voice cold and quiet. "For him alone. You tried to turn me into an object, a thing to be managed and disposed of. From this moment on, my decisions about you are not about being your mother. They are about my responsibility to myself and to every other person you would have destroyed." The trial, weeks later, was almost a formality. I sat on the witness stand, clear-headed and precise. I recounted the pills, the gaslighting, the forged signatures. Ethan's defense attorney tried to paint him as a son in crisis, overwhelmed by his mother's tragic decline. But the prosecution's star witness was the church's own hard drive. They played the audio. The entire courtroom heard Ethan's panic, Marla's greed, and Pastor Cole's unmistakable, "I told you not to write anything down. You fool." The judge was not lenient. Cole and Marla received long sentences for their organized, predatory scheme. Dr. Harlan was stripped of his medical license and received his own sentence for the fraud. And Ethan, as both a family member who violated a sacred trust and a key conspirator, received a lengthy term with no chance of early parole. The last time I saw him, he was being led out of the courtroom. He stopped and looked back at me, his face a twisted mask of hatred and utter despair. He was looking for a sign, perhaps of mercy, perhaps of regret. I gave him nothing. I did not cry. I did not look away. I simply held his gaze and gave a single, slight nod. A confirmation. You made your choice, and this is the consequence. It was the coldest, most complete revenge I could imagine. Not fire, but ice. I would let the law and his own guilt be his jailers. The final scene was on the courthouse steps. It was a cold day, the wind sharp. Graham stood on one side of me, his arm in a sling from the attack, but alive. Naomi stood on the other, her hand resting on my arm. We stood in silence, watching the prisoner transport van pull away from the curb, carrying my son to his new life. I took a long, deep breath of the frigid air. Now, I said, my voice dry. Now we decide how to live, not to forgive, but to make sure they, and others like them, never get the chance to do this again. I turned my back on the court and walked down the cold, damp stone steps, carrying my pain, my anger, and the new, terrible freedom I had bought with my own sanity. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I really appreciate you all being here. Let me know where in the world you are listening from in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you and share our thoughts. Please subscribe to Grandma's Family Diary and like this video. And if you can, hit that hype button to help this story be heard by more people.